They say Cleopatra wasn't the most beautiful woman in Egypt. But when she entered a room, empires shifted. Not because she demanded attention, but because she didn't need to. She carried something that couldn't be taught, couldn't be bought, couldn't be stolen. She carried herself. History remembers her not for her beauty, but for her presence. The way she could command a room with a single glance. The way she could speak in whispers and have kings lean in to listen. The way she ruled not through force, but through something far more dangerous. The quiet certainty of someone who had never forgotten who she was. This is what happens when someone stops performing power and starts being it. The world tells us to be louder, bolder, more aggressive, to fight for our place at the table. But what if the real secret was never in the fighting? What if it was in the pause before you speak? In the way you hold your coffee cup like you're holding the world? In the ancient art of taking up space without taking anything away from anyone else? This isn't about being seen. It's about being felt. And the difference between the two is everything. We live in a world that teaches women to be loud to be heard, to take up space aggressively, to speak over others to prove our worth. But what if the real power was never in the noise? What if it was in the pause before speaking? In the way someone holds their body when they truly belong to themselves? In the quiet certainty that comes from knowing, really knowing, who they are when no one else is watching? Most of us have been performing strength for so long, we've forgotten what it feels like to simply rest in our own skin. We've learned to justify our existence, to explain our choices, to apologize for taking up space. We've been taught that power is something we have to fight for, something we have to prove we deserve. But there's another way. There always has been. The Cleopatra Effect isn't about manipulation or games. It's not about becoming untouchable or cold. It's about remembering something that's been forgotten. That true power flows from the inside out, not the other way around. Think about the last time someone truly captivated you, not through their words or their accomplishments, but through their presence. There was something in their eyes, a stillness, a knowing. They weren't trying to impress you. They weren't performing. They were simply complete. This is what happens when someone has made peace with themselves. When they've stopped fighting the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. When they've learned to hold their own contradictions, their softness and their strength, their vulnerability and their power, without needing to choose between them. Most of us spend our lives trying to become someone we think we should be. We mirror others' energy. We change our voice depending on who's in the room. We shrink or expand based on what we think is expected. But the woman who radiates soft power, she's learned to be the same person in every room she enters. She doesn't need to prove her intelligence. You can feel it in the way she listens. She doesn't need to announce her strength. You can see it in the way she sets boundaries without explanation. She doesn't need to perform her worth. You can sense it in the way she moves through the world, unhurried and unafraid. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being whole. It's about no longer abandoning yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly adjusting yourself for others, from being different versions of yourself depending on who's watching, from speaking in someone else's voice because you've forgotten what your own sounds like. But when someone has learned to be consistently themselves, when they've stopped performing and started being, something shifts. They carry themselves differently. They speak differently. They don't need to convince anyone of anything because they're not trying to prove their worth. They know it. But here's what no one tells you about soft power. It's not soft because it's weak. It's soft because it doesn't need to be hard. Like water that carves through stone, not through force, but through persistence, through knowing its own nature and never apologizing for it. There's a moment that comes for every woman who discovers this truth. It might happen in a boardroom when she realizes she doesn't need to speak louder to be heard. She needs to speak with more intention. It might happen in a relationship when she stops explaining herself and starts simply being herself. It might happen in front of a mirror when she looks at her reflection and, for the first time in years, doesn't immediately catalog what's wrong. This moment feels like coming home to yourself after a long journey, like remembering a language you thought you'd forgotten, like finding a key you didn't know you'd lost. The woman who embodies the Cleopatra Effect has learned to move through the world like she belongs in it. Not because she's conquered it, but because she's made peace with her place in it. She's learned that confidence isn't about never feeling uncertain. It's about not abandoning yourself when uncertainty arrives. She's discovered that the most revolutionary thing a woman can do is simply refuse to perform. Refuse to shrink. Refuse to explain. Refuse to audition for her own life. The Cleopatra Effect is built on 3 simple truths. First, real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. When someone is truly comfortable in their own skin, when they've stopped apologizing for existing, when they've learned to hold space for themselves without taking it from others, that presence speaks louder than any words ever could. Second, the most magnetic people aren't those who try to be liked by everyone. They're the ones who have learned to like themselves. Not just love themselves, but actually enjoy their own company. They're the ones who can sit in silence without feeling the need to fill it. Who can listen without preparing their response. Who can be present without performing presence. Third, soft power isn't about being quiet or passive. It's about being intentional. It's about choosing your words carefully, not because you're afraid of them, but because you understand their weight. It's about moving through the world with purpose, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you know where you're going. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who you should be. It's about finding your way back to that inner knowing that existed before you learned to doubt yourself. The woman who radiates soft power doesn't need to tell you she's powerful. You feel it in the way she holds her coffee cup, in the way she listens to your story without trying to top it, in the way she can disagree without being disagreeable, in the way she can say no without explanation and yes without reservation. She's learned the ancient art of being present in her own life, of inhabiting her own body, of trusting her own voice. And in a world full of people trying to be someone else, there's nothing more magnetic than someone who has learned to be themselves. The Cleopatra Effect isn't about power over others. It's about power with yourself. It's about the quiet revolution that happens when someone stops performing and starts being. When they stop proving and start knowing. When they stop trying to be seen and start being felt. Because in the end, the most powerful thing any of us can do is simply be fully, completely, unapologetically ourselves. And in that being, we give others permission to do the same. That's the real magic. That's the real power. That's the real effect.